Edamura was a bummy convict loser who thought he was Japan's top scammer. But one day when he tried to scam a suave Frenchman, he unknowingly got bamboozled into a world of international con men, turning his life upside down, while our boy dangles from the sign screaming for help. Let's find out how he f***ed this up. The day before, a supposed government worker visited an old woman's house, claiming he needs to test her water purity. He offered to install a special water purifier, but his ugly ass made her suspicious, so she told the fugly to leave. Afterward, she noticed a flyer on her fridge from the Tokyo Water Bureau and decided to call them instead. Our boy Edamura answered the call and praised her for contacting the real agency, then confirmed her water was safe to drink for grannies like her. But when she showed concern for her granddaughter that frequently visits, he offered a pricey water purifier to ease her troubles, and she agreed no hessy. Later, the two so-called Water Bureau employees met at a toy machine, discussing their cons. The older man named Jin praised Edamura for outsmarting the old woman. Edamura then spun the machine, winning an action figure of an ancient samurai, inspiring him to vow to follow the footsteps of the great Hideyoshi and become Japan's greatest con man.
Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
Soon after, Gin stood beside a foreign man at a food shack. As Edamura walked by, he spotted a wallet on the ground and handed it to the American, claiming it was his. When the man tried to take it, Gin objected, trying to claim it for himself. Not trusting Gin's fugly face, Edamura decided to take the wallet to the police instead, but the American quickly claimed it, offering Edamura money as thanks. Before leaving, he hugged Edamura, saying his goodbyes. Back home, Edamura and Gin celebrated their con, mocking the American for being greedy enough to claim a wallet that wasn't his. But when Edamura opened the wallet, he realized that he was the real dumbass. The man switched the wallets, leaving them with the newspaper they tried to give him. Their situation worsened when they heard knocking and realized government officials were outside searching for them. Panicked, Edamura dipped out the window while Gin hid in a closet for some reason. Edamura fled through the neighborhood, vaulting small fences until he spotted the American and hitched a ride with him in a taxi. When he tried to confront the man teased him by thanking him for the wallet, saying, "You really are a special kind of dumbass, aren't you?" The American offered Edamura candy to make up for it, but he says nah, then asks where they're going. He tells him to the airport, then Los Angeles. Edamura decides skipping town's a good idea, and so they're off to LA. Later, they landed in Los Angeles, and Edamura followed the American to his car, claiming he's going to follow him until he gets his money back. The man smiled and obliged, but they quickly found themselves stuck in traffic. While waiting, the man asked Edamura why he'd spent more on the flight than the wallet was worth. Edamura claimed to be Japan's top scammer and couldn't let himself be fooled. The man laughed at his claim and called his English a hopeless jumble, leading Edamura to defend his honor while the man continued to laugh. Their argument was interrupted by a news bulletin. The top movie producer, Kasano, was just released from prison, all charges dropped. The American explained to Edamura that Kasano was behind the Die Hot movie series, which Edamura hadn't heard of. The traffic began to move, and the American said it's time to lock in, then pointed to the item he was going to sell. Edamura guessed it was a con job, and bet the American he could sell it at a higher price, and if he won, the American would owe him $300,000 and work for him. If he lost, Edamura would become his assistant. The man said, "Big bet, but we gotta get drippy first." At the mall they got the drip, but Edamura got jelly, asking why the man looked so much better than him. So he told Edamura, "It's because I'm him. Unlike your bummy broke can't get a generic pro tag wannabe con man looking ass." Finally, the man introduced himself as Laurent, and when he heard Edamura's name, he playfully called him Extramura. Edamura claims he's not a sauce, but it's no use. Later, they stand before a grand mansion where they waited at the gate for their client. A group of mafioso approached them, flashing guns and demanding to know Edamura's business. Laurent introduced Edamura as the special guest their client was expecting. The men opened the gate, allowing them to meet their client by the pool. Edamura recognized him as Kasano, the film producer from the TV earlier. Laurent revealed that Kasano was actually a mob boss, using the film industry as a front. Laurent then presented the Japanese candy he had previously given Edamura, claiming he planned to sell it to Kasano for $5 million. Edamura thought it was cap, but Laurent told him to watch this young blood. As Kasano approached, he dismissed the script he was holding as garbage and asked one of the girls to get his guest some champagne. He then introduced Abby as a looker, but not very smart. Kasano then asked what Edamura was good for. Laurent introduced him as a doctor who created the special drug they were selling, and Kasano immediately asked to see the product. Abby returned with the champagne, but Laurent declined, and instead offered Abby the first taste of the product. She chewed the candy, and before Kasano could dismiss it, Abby got hella lit and began jumping around the pool like a monkey before calming down in bliss. Seeing the product in action, the other women eagerly approached Edamura, asking for a taste. Suddenly, Laurent grabbed Edamura from behind and shoved the candy into his mouth, shocking him. When Edamura freed himself, he noticed Laurent's watch was identical to Gin's, immediately realizing he'd been played. He lost his composure and ran from the pool, trying to escape. The bodyguard chased him, but Edamura tricked him by throwing sand in his eyes and using him to jump the fence. Kasano and Laurent watched in amazement, with Laurent offering to catch Edamura with Abby's help. They tracked Edamura to an alley where he was hiding, and when Laurent found him, Edamura threatened to use his karate skills. Laurent told him to go ahead, and Edamura charged recklessly, tripping over an outstretched leg before getting mollywopped by Abby. When Edamura woke up, he was hanging from the Hollywood sign and started shouting for help, spotting Abby and Laurent below. He threatened to get back at them and asked who Laurent really is, so Laurent introduces himself as a confidence man. Laurent promised to let him down and explain things once he woke up. Confused, he agrees anyway, and Abby cut him loose, sending him crashing down and knocked out into a flashback. In a hospital, Edamura was taking care of his critically ill mom. He mentioned he'd landed a sales job at a tea company. She tried the tea and gagged immediately because it tasted like trash. Despite her discomfort, Edamura's mom apologized for the mistakes of his bummy-ass father, forcing him into these low-level jobs. He reassured her he's fine with his life, and she smiled, grateful for his forgiveness. Before leaving, he handed her a toy cat she promised to cherish. The next day, Edamura was selling the tea. Customers were skeptical due to the awful taste, but when he pitched the tea's benefits, such as weight loss and reducing cancer cells, they started to listen. He initially offered a carton for 5,000 yen, but a man in the crowd haggled him down to 3,500. Soon enough, Edamura's tactics had customers lining up, one after another. Back at the office, Jin praised him for his success, celebrating the hundreds of sales, but their victory party was cut short when government agents stormed in, accusing them of selling fraudulent merchandise. With that, Edamura quickly realized he's been with the wrong crowd, and he's royally fucked. During interrogation, no one cared about Edamura's claims of innocence, and after his trial, he was sentenced to a year in prison with 4 years of probation. Branded a convict, he later visited his mom, apologized for his absence, and filled her in on the scandal. She had no issues, trusting him completely. Luckily his mom ain't black. He'd be getting an ass whooping right now. Afterward, Edamura tried to find a new job, desperate for a fresh start, but his prison record and his father's criminal background made it impossible. Weeks of searching led nowhere, and his mom passed away, leaving him devastated. A few days later, he found Jin on a walk, and once Jin recognized him, he apologized for deceiving him and braced for beatdown. But Edamura surprised him by saying he'd embrace the role of a con man, since that's what society expected from him. Snapped out of his flashback, Edamura woke up to find the two crazies who strung him up. They invited him to dinner to explain everything. On their way to the table, Edamura accidentally bumped into a man and stained his shirt. He offered to pay for the cleaning, but the man forgave him and waved him off. At the table, Laurent tried explaining things, but Edamura tuned out, staring off in frustration. Edamura then asked why Laurent drugged him, insisting he'd stayed away from drugs his whole life. Laurent assured him there was no such thing as the Sakura magic drug. All he had was candy. When Edamura looked at Abby, she mimicked her actions from earlier, revealing the scam. Laurent continued, explaining Kasano was searching for Sakura magic and its creator, which led him to Japan in search of con men. He used Kim as bait, along with fake government agents to lure Edamura into their scheme. Laurent then dropped the bomb, claiming he knows everything about Extramura, including why he became a con man. Just then, Edamura spotted Kasano's men outside and asked if they were part of Laurent's plan too. Laurent denied, saying they were real gangsters and we should probably dip. Before Laurent could pay, Edamura used one of his tricks to pin the bill on the man he'd bumped into earlier, telling Laurent he wasn't going to be outdone by another con man. Laurent then spilled his details on Kasano, a failed movie producer turned gangster who now controlled American gangs and smuggled products. He also trafficked failed actresses into special services, earning himself a nasty reputation. A few days earlier, Laurent met with Kasano, who offered him any amount of money for Sakura magic. Seeing this as his golden opportunity, Laurent agreed, setting the stage for Edamura's involvement. They arrived at a hotel, and Laurent finished his explanation, warning Edamura that Kasano was dangerous and it was best to follow orders, and as he left, Laurent reminded Edamura of their bet, telling him get ready to take this L. That night, while Abby slept, Edamura packed his bags to make a break for it, but before he could slip away, Abby caught him in a sleeper hold, threatening to choke him out if he tried to run. She released him only when he flipped a coin, warning him to stay put. Catching his breath, Edamura asked why she worked for Laurent, but she denied it, saying she was on her own, and when she called him an incel, he stormed back to his room fuming. A few hours later, Edamura escaped and wandered around Los Angeles. He looked to his Hideyoshi figure, hoping for some sort of guidance. The next morning, Laurent showed up as Abby bathed. He asked how she let Edamura escape, and she suggested they find a replacement, but Laurent wasn't worried, saying Edamura would be back by noon. Noon came and went, and still no sign of Edamura, forcing him to hold that L. He returned to Kasano with an excuse ready, but to his shock, Kasano informed him Edamura was already at the pool. Not only that, Edamura had doubled the price to 10 million yen while making the deal exclusive. When Laurent reached the pool, Edamura tossed him the Hideyoshi figure, smirking as he declares he's the better con. Meanwhile, at In-N-Out, a detective orders 2 number 9s, a number 9 large,
a number 6 with extra dip, a number 7, 2 number...
When other customers honked, he yelled at them to zip it. Back at his apartment, he handed the burgers to his coworkers, then used a telescope to spy on the Cassano mansion he was investigating. He muttered about bringing Cassano down, but choked on a stray pickle in his burger, realizing it wasn't a number 9 large. When a coworker offered to trade burgers, he threw it at him, telling him to shut it. Meanwhile, at the Cassano mansion, Edamura smugly demanded a foot massage from Laurent, after claiming he wins the bet. After dodging Abby last night, he reminisced about his dream of becoming a Japanese legend, then binged the Die Hot series to carry out an idea. The next day he arrived at the airport and Salazar knocked him out cold, taking him to Cassano. He questioned him about trying to bail on the deal, but Edamura explained he wanted out due to all the risks. He committed his life to a project before, only for the product to be stolen with someone else getting all the credit. Cassano, unfazed, insisted on moving forward with his prized Sakura magic product. Edamura told him he'd never understand, and Cassano pressed him asking if he'd seen any of his movies. Edamura denied it, saying his movies are only a front for money laundering and has no real passion. Cassano told him bet, and sat him down to watch the movies to prove his passion. That's when Edamura realizes Cassano's behind the Die Hot franchise, leaving him in shock, claiming it's his favorite movie and goes by a different name in Japan. Edamura praised Die Hot and claims that Cassano must have real passion if he created this movie. They both know how it feels to create something they really care about. Cassano felt flattered and agreed to pay any price for Sakura. With that, Edamura doubled the rate from 5 million to 10 million, while also throwing in the Sakura magic recipe. Cassano initially objects, but Edamura asks what price would you put on your passion project, comparing Sakura magic and Die Hot like it's their children. He understands and agrees. Back in the present, Edamura bragged to Laurent for underestimating him, telling him to look at me, I'm the captain now. Laurent gave Edamura credit for being able to act like he loved a movie as trash as Die Hot, but Edamura immediately bites back, claiming Die Hot is a genuine masterpiece, better than anything Marvel has put out in years.
What the hell is even that?
Just then, the buyers arrived, giving them hope the deal was finally closing. As they waited for the money, Cassano stalled, saying his lawyers wanted to confirm some details with Japanese contacts. He assured Edamura this is just a safety measure, but Edamura was shaking in his boots, especially when he noticed Salazar blocking his escape. Back in Japan, Jin and Kim posed as fake doctor contacts, convincing Cassano's lawyers of Edamura's credentials, then slipped out just before the real doctor returned. Cassano gets clearance and stepped toward Edamura menacingly, but surprised Edamura with a warm hug, calling him Japan fam. That night, they celebrated, and Laurent whispered to Edamura that their score is now tied for bailing him out. When they asked for payment, Cassano stalled, noting the cops nearby, and suggested they delay. Detective Anderson and his team then trailed Cassano, only to get faked out when another car from Cassano's estate zipped down a different route. Anderson was one step ahead though, tailing both cars in a high-speed chase. Cassano's driver outmaneuvered the cops, leaving Anderson's car to crash. Cassano then taunted Anderson, revealing that he was secretly on Cassano's payroll, leaving Edamura even more shook. Arriving at a shady warehouse, Cassano claimed it was HQ. When Edamura asked about the money, Cassano refused, insisting Edamura make the Sakura magic right there in front of everyone, leaving Edamura once again seconds away from shitting his pants. But suddenly he gets an idea and calls the setup unfit for his craft, bummy, trash, too filthy to do his job. Laurent butts in, calling Extramura a clean freak. Cassano understands and immediately offered to renovate the whole building, only making Edamura more nervous. Meanwhile, Anderson walks in on a bunch of randoms working in their base, and when he told them get to stepping, it's revealed that the woman is the famous agent Paula, who's been put in charge of their investigation, effective immediately. She tells them Cassano isn't her real goal, however. Catching Laurent and Edamura is. Anderson begrudgingly agreed to help, though his team isn't thrilled. That evening, Salazar drove the group back with Cassano going over the plan. Edamura would stay in the US under Salazar's watch until the renovations were done. He and Laurent tried to argue, but Cassano was adamant, treating Edamura like a special guest. Soon enough, Edamura found himself in Salazar's guest room, settling in to endure the wait until it was finally time to cook up the infamous Sakura magic. Flashback to a courtroom, a lawyer defended his client as a young Edamura watched in awe. The lawyer won the case, the clients thanked him, and Oz looked proudly at his son, who shyly sought his attention. On the walk home, Edamura rode on his father's shoulders, while his mom chatted about Oz needing to spend more time with them, earning a kick. The mom asks Edamura if he will be a lawyer one day, but he denies, saying he doesn't want to be a nerd and would rather get bitches. Oz claims nerds can pull the hose too, but overall good morals are better than studying anyway, as they laugh and stroll in the sunset. Suddenly, Edamura awoke from the dream to see Salazar, who told him they were going out. He then wonders why those memories are coming up at a time like this. Later that morning, he rode with Cassano and crew to the warehouse to check on renovations. The workers were hustling, with Edamura and Laurent adding small comments. When Cassano asked about the timeline, they promised 2 weeks, but he pushed them to finish in 1. Cassano then gave Edamura the week to explore Los Angeles, leaving him under Salazar's watch and protection. After giving final orders, Cassano left in his limo, leaving Edamura and Laurent alone. At the police base, Paula revealed she'd tracked down the warehouse, mocking Anderson for never finding something so obvious. She explained that the deal between Cassano and Laurent was likely happening there, and that they'd need to be ready to infiltrate. She asked Anderson to go undercover, but he refused, so she marked Edamura as her next target. That night, Abby strolled in and nearly killed this man by plugging his nose. Once he wakes up, she pulled out an iPad to show Lawrence's new plan, teach Edamura how to break bad with tutorials from an overseas drug dealer. Edamura starts complaining like a bitch, but Abby exited through the window unbothered, claiming Edamura created the mess himself for promising Cassano a recipe. The next day, Salazar took Edamura around the city, starting with the Walk of Fame, then to a stadium for a baseball game. Edamura barely paid attention, distracted by a happy family nearby. He asked Salazar about his own family, and Salazar shared that his wife passed in an accident, and his son Tom was in a foster home, where he gets to visit him once a week. Edamura asks when's the next visit, and when he finds out today was supposed to be one, he was moved and suggested they visit Tom instead. At the foster home, Tom embraced his dad, then eyed Edamura curiously. When he recognized Edamura as Japanese, the racist brat asked if he was a ninja. Edamura decided to play along and said yes, making the boy smile. They went to an amusement park where the roller coaster left Edamura wobbly, much to Tom's amusement. Then they tried a capsule toy machine. When Tom got a gangster figure instead of a bodyguard figure to mimic his dad, Salazar remained stoic, while Edamura offered to trade his samurai figure to cheer him up. Taking a restroom break, Edamura reflected on how this day reminds him of his own father. But his nostalgia was short-lived once police ambushed him in the restroom with his power pole still hanging out. I guess Anderson swings that way. He's a little too satisfied by this. Inside, Paula confronted him, explaining they needed him as a mole in the sting operation, and offered him a deal: help, and he'd get a free pass back to Japan. Refuse, and prison awaited. As Edamura considered his options, Paula handed him a pair of glasses equipped with a camera and mic, telling him to put them on if he agreed to cooperate. Later, after dropping Tom off at the foster home, they went back to Salazar's, where Edamura found Abby waiting in his room. She handed him the iPad showing Laurent on screen, ready to continue the lessons. Laurent warned him that the factory would be ready soon, and to be cautious since Paula and the FBI were now involved. Abby left, and Edamura warned her to be cautious around Laurent, but she claims she can handle it unlike Edamura, and he should worry about himself. The next morning, Edamura noticed a camera hidden in a toy bear. Startled, he dropped it just as Salazar entered, awkwardly brushing it off. They headed to Cassano's house for a sushi party. Cassano was surrounded by women, enjoying the celebration, and introduced Edamura as the candy guy, who'd be helping with Sakura magic. Cassano then brought up how he'd nearly been jailed, and started alluding to a traitor among them, putting Edamura on edge. He asked Abby and Laurent if they thought double-crossing him was a good idea, and both dismissed it. When he looked at Edamura, Cassano insisted it was true, saying a traitor is present. With a bat in hand, Cassano strolled toward Edamura, who's once again about to shit his pants. Cassano then swung the bat full force, only to hit the man behind Edamura, reminding the man that snitches get stitches, before kicking him out this party. Edamura's relieved, but the stress gotta be getting to him. Later that night, Edamura confronted Salazar about the camera, accusing him of knowing about his plans to double-cross Cassano. Unfazed, Salazar said his job was only to protect Cassano physically, not prevent scams. When Edamura asked why he stayed loyal to Cassano, Salazar replied it was all for his son. He'd left his gang life behind to give his son a better future. Thinking of Tom's situation, Edamura remembered his own father's downfall. After school one day, he'd come home to find his mother watching news coverage of a people shipping gang bust, his dad among those arrested, the shock sending his mother into poor health. That night, Edamura examined the FBI glasses and made his choice. He contacted Paula, agreeing to help on the condition that Salazar would remain unharmed. The next day, the group entered the warehouse where Edamura would make Sakura magic. Seeing the renovations, Laurent said this probably cost more than Cassano's divorce, but Cassano assured him his old took way more. Sounds about right. When Laurent asked about the cash, Cassano had his men open one of the boxes, refusing to let him touch it until the Sakura magic was done. Edamura insisted on working alone and began his setup once everyone left the room. Looking at the ingredients, he felt a wave of doubt, but Paula's voice in his glasses told him to stay calm. He steadied himself and got to work. Recalling his talk with Paula, who refused to let Salazar off the hook, saying he was too vital to Kasano's operation and ain't sliding past a life sentence. Back at work, Edamura carefully mixed the ingredients, creating the Sakura magic, impressing everyone watching. He finished the Sakura magic and asked for some air. Outside, Laurent and Abby congratulated him, offering him coffee. Edamura reminded them he doesn't want to be Walter White, prompting Laurent to tell him he couldn't be the GOAT even if he tried.
I am the one who knocks.
After they were gone, Edamura asked Paula how long Laurent and Abby's sentence would be. 20 years, she confirmed, giving him a moment of pause. He went back in, packaged the Sakura magic, and prepped for the handoff. At that moment, the FBI was preparing to move in, assuring Edamura no one would be harmed. As the Sakura magic was exchanged and the money counted, an unsettling silence took over. Some of Kasano's men walked in and reported that the construction workers were back with urgent news. Just then, officers crashed through the roof, surrounding Kasano and his men. They ordered everyone to get down as Paula appeared, introducing herself and calling Edamura to her, shocking the room. Edamura says he was looking out for himself, but Abby ain't having it and suddenly grabs an officer's gun. Laurent panics and tells them not to shoot as he tries to protect her, prompting the officers to gun them both down. Edamura's in shock and becomes furious, yelling at Paula for breaking their promise of no harm. The officers dismissed it as protocol. Enraged, Edamura grabbed a gun and held it to Paula, demanding no one move. He called Salazar over, preparing to make a run for it. Meanwhile, Kasano slips away behind a container and triggers an explosion. As Edamura comes to, he realizes Salazar protected him, but seeing that Kasano was escaping, Edamura leaves Salazar to chase him down. He quickly catches up to Kasano's fat ass and tackles him, but Kasano struck him off and grabbed a traffic cone, hitting Edamura repeatedly. He's about to finish him off when Salazar intervened, knocking Kasano out cold.
Surprise, motherfucker!
When Edamura came to, he was in an FBI truck with Laurent and Abby's corpses beside him. Kasano's being interrogated by Paula, who presented hard evidence against him. Realizing he was trapped, Kasano tried bargaining with Paula, offering a massive bribe. After a lot of negotiation, Paula agreed to a $100 million payout, stunning Edamura. Kasano paid up, and Paula agreed to transfer all charges onto Salazar. Edamura is furious and calls Paula a bitch maid, lying ass, butter-faced, saggy bittied. But suddenly he was knocked out cold. When he woke up, he was on a hammock on a beach with Paula beside him. She called out, and to his surprise, Laurent and Abby appeared, alive and well. Edamura looks to his comrades in shock as the woman reveals her real name is Cynthia and welcome him to her private island. My man's just got bamboozled. Inside the villa, Edamura is still in shock as he's surrounded by tons of people celebrating, all of which are people he ran into while on the con job. He thinks back to the incident and is informed that Laurent and Abby faked their injuries to fool Kasano. Salazar was released and given the evidence to put Kasano away, while allowing him to get a plea deal. Soon after, Kasano's arrested and demands to see Paula, only to be shocked when he finds it out he's currently talking to the real Paula. 100 million gone for no reason. Meanwhile, Salazar was freed and allowed more visits with his son. On the island, Edamura realized the entire setup, from the FBI agents to Paula. Everything was planned out and moved seamless, without him realizing. Just then, Kim arrived with the money, making Laurent ecstatic. They opened the briefcases, celebrating the $110 million they'd scored from Kasano. Laurent tossed money in the air, everyone making money angels in celebration, then handed Edamura a bag filled with his share. That evening, the group prepared to part ways. Laurent invited Edamura to join them, offering him a spot as an intern like they promised. But Edamura looked at his Hideyoshi figure and told them to wait 4 years, as he needed time to get his life together first. Back in Japan, Edamura went to the police station, handed over his share of the money, and confessed to being a con man, ready to start anew. Little did he know things are just getting started. In prison, Edamura was working on an engine when his supervisor praised his skills and offered him a job opportunity upon release, emphasizing his late mother would want this for him. Later, Gin visited Edamura, mentioning a con operation abroad, but he barely paid attention, and a few months later, he was released. He thanked the prison staff and left. Back at his apartment, he paid his overdue rent, then checked out the new capsule machine. He snagged an action figure of a hardworking farmer, his fresh start now clear. The next day, he turned down Laurent's offer and started work at an auto shop. When the old man mistook him for a salesman, Edamura quickly corrected him, saying he's the new hire. Living honestly, he learned the ropes of fixing cars and got used to the 9-to-5 life, finding some peace. One day, while working, the shop owner took him to an old hangar, showing off a prize plane from a past war. He suggested Edamura try fixing the propeller, sealing Edamura's resolve to stick to his new life. He began getting a crash course in aircraft mechanics. Before long, his work brought the old plane back to life, soaring above as the owner admired his skill. When he realized Edamura had only been there 2 months, he praised him, and insisted he take a mechanic job at an upcoming air race. At a secluded garage, Edamura eagerly showed off his skills to the plane recruitment team when suddenly he heard a familiar voice applauding, upsetting him, and revealed to be Laurent, Abby, and Cynthia. Cynthia called him a dumbass for not realizing he was at her secluded island, and as he came to terms with his stupidity, Laurent welcomed him to Team Confidence. Back at the old man's garage, it's revealed that he was given a hefty amount of money from Laurent to train Edamura. Once again, our boy was played like a fiddle. While Edamura was busy being butthurt for being played again, Laurent explained the next target is Sam and Clark Ibrahim, two princes of an oil-rich country who were hosting a high-stakes air race. Although reluctant at first, Edamura agreed to be their mechanic on the condition they don't involve him in the scam itself. Time to scam the brothers out of a cool $200 million. Laurent tells Abby to begin her training, but she refused to pilot the plane Edamura fixed, telling him there's no way she's going to trust the skills of a spineless, gullible-ass, incel, suspect-looking mother. Unamused, Edamura defended his work, only to end up in the cockpit with her by force. Edamura is about ready to shit his pants when the engine stalls, and Laurent chimes in, telling Extramura he's still a bum-ass plane engine mechanic. He was only trained to look like one. He's a scam artist after all. Abby ejects them both just before the plane explodes, and Laurent quietly reveals he tampered the engine with some kind of pill, this gaslighting motherfucker. Later, Abby's haunted by a dark past flashing in her dreams. She suddenly wakes up in a cold sweat, now in the Singapore Air Race facility. Laurent and Edamura watched in awe as planes zipped around the city, twisting and turning. Their target, Clark, crossed the finish line, setting a new record and immediately swarmed by a bunch of women, leaving Edamura hella jelly. Laurent then clued Edamura in. Clark is the golden prince of the air race scene, only 25 and already a superstar, and his brother Sam is the event organizer watching from the high rise. The brothers had been disowned by their family, but Clark's marketing talent gave them a foothold back into high society. They bought a struggling air race company and flipped it into the Pathfinder air race, which quickly became a hit after buying out competitors to ensure Clark's victories. Laurent offered Edamura his boba, but he declined. Curious why other pilots went along with the rigged game, Laurent explained that the pilots didn't mind since they were paid well, except for one. There was a racer named Lewis who made a name for himself as Clark's rival. He played his part like the rest, but one day became fed up with it and tried to genuinely beat Clark. However, Sam found out and sabotaged his plane, leading to a tragic crash that left him paralyzed. Wow, this man a douche. After hearing about Sam's dirty tactics, Edamura snatched the boba and drank it, finally agreeing to fully be involved in the scam. Soon after, Abby took off, impressively weaving through city obstacles, but when she suddenly spots faces in the crowd, she started having flashbacks, memories flooding back and throwing her off balance. Despite the struggle, she gathered herself and just barely qualified to move on. When she landed, Edamura noticed something was off with Abby, but Laurent brushed it off as fatigue. This irritated Edamura, so he accused Laurent of being so heartless, like how could you be so cold as the winter wind when it breathes, yo. But Laurent told him to cut that Kanye shit out and reassured him, pointing to Cynthia as their hidden ace. With Abby and Cynthia as the first female racer-owner duo in competition history, were bound to grab attention from the public and the Ibrahim brothers, known for their weakness for women. Later that night, Clark and Sam lounged by a pool when Sam noticed tweets going viral about them, roasting Clark in the competition. I bet it's all rigged. Things were more exciting when Lewis was still racing. They want to be like the Tate brothers so bad. Elsewhere, it's revealed to be Edamura sending the tweets from anonymous troll accounts, throwing shade. Annoyed, he yelled at Laurent for sticking him with all the grunt work. Back at the pool, the Ibrahim brothers enjoyed the company of their entourage until an argument broke out between a pool staff member and a woman wanting to enter. Realizing it was the Ibrahims, Cynthia backed down and tried to leave with Abby, only for Clark to spot them. Persuaded by the hype, the brothers dismissed the other girls and invited Cynthia's team to the pool, where Clark gets heavy googly-eyed for Abby. He asked her to hop in, but she told him no, because she has no swimsuit. When he insisted, Abby reluctantly let the biddies out and got in anyway. That's when Clark knew his power pole needed some breathing room and tossed his Speedo to a pissed-off Sam. Seizing the moment, Cynthia slides up to Sam, flirting as she pitched the idea of teaming up with Abby for Pathfinder racing. She slipped a note in his pocket, suggesting he call if interested, and they left. Back in the apartment, Abby went straight to bed while Cynthia briefed Edamura and Laurent on her mission. Just then, Sam called Cynthia, confirming her bait worked. As Cynthia went to take a shower, Laurent sat up, complimenting Edamura for being a natural-born swindler like himself and Cynthia. When Edamura asked about Abby, Laurent admitted she was different, with her own agenda. The next day, the races continued. Laurent and Edamura watched from the sidelines as Abby faced off against a veteran racer named Toto. Toto took the lead, and Edamura worried, but Laurent assured him Cynthia was in the VIP section, rigged to win this match and keeping an eye on things. But as things picked up, Toto refused to back down, and so Cynthia confronted Sam about breaking their deal. When he denies any deal being made, Cynthia tries using the biddies to persuade him, but he pushed her away and declared his disinterest in mediocre racers like Abby, saying women are meant for the kitchen, and he has no interest in Cynthia's saggy biddies. Laurent, overhearing, knew Sam had just triggered Cynthia's wrath. Meanwhile, Abby was struggling in the plane, memories flashing back of blood and war, threatening to drown her. Just before a crash seemed inevitable, Edamura's loud cheer pulled her back, giving her the boost to bring out that crazed look in her eyes. She swerves throughout the obstacles, keeping up, and at the last second she passes the finish line right next to Toto, and the replay reveals Abby as the winner. This quickly silenced Sam's arrogance, and he makes a call to rig the final round as Abby versus Clark. This man may be a misogynist, but he sure is about his business. In the stands, Laurent finally confided in Edamura about Abby's motivations for conning. She wants to die. The next day, Edamura took Abby to a Ferris wheel, saying he wanted to talk. When she asked what about, he probed into her life, insisting a team should know about each other, but she shot him down, reminding him they weren't a team. Switching gears, he offered her a ballerina capsule toy. She asked what it was for, and he explained that capsule toys were his good luck charms. Unmoved, she yeeted that shit. After picking up the toy, Edamura assured her he was there to listen, only to realize he triggered his fear of heights halfway up the Ferris wheel. Later, the group gathered in an apartment they planned to renovate into an underground casino for their scheme against Sam. Abby questioned how they'd convince him, and Cynthia stepped in, saying her curves would do the trick. That night, Cynthia approached Sam at a casino, trying to butter him up, but he brushed her off, calling her a saggy old bitch, and said he's only into younger women.
FBI, open up!
Back at the apartment, she vented her frustration by punching a pillow. Edamura tried to comfort her, but ended up getting mollywopped instead. Due to Cynthia's approach failing, they decided Edamura would be the bait, using his skills as a mechanic to get into Sam's team. Later, they welcomed the retired Louis and his wife Isabel in hopes of getting help with the plan. Louis agreed on one condition: don't just scam them, put them 6 feet under. Cynthia objected, saying they only target wallets, not lives. Louis angrily insisted, demanding the brothers be taken out, but Isabel calmed him down with his medicine. Reluctantly, he agreed to let Isabel handle it without him. The next day, the Ibrahim brothers lost their mechanic to a sudden family emergency, leaving them scrambling. Isabel and Edamura showed up just in time, with Isabel introducing Edamura as a skilled mechanic looking for a job. Edamura introduced himself as Louis's old mechanic, and gave them attitude as he heavily implied the brothers tampered with Louis's plane. Both brothers became suspicious, and just as Isabel shut him up, Team Confidence showed up for their scheduled interview. They heavily praised Edamura's skills right in front of the brothers just before walking off. Suddenly the brothers are hooked, and Clark insists Edamura interviews with them as well. Later that night, the team celebrated Isabel's performance. Their excitement was interrupted when Louis appeared grumbling about their jolly mood. He asked Isabel to take him home for his medicine, and as they left, Laurent commented that ex-military like him tend to be grumpy, catching Abby's attention. Edamura speculated that Louis lost his previous race due to a mole in his team, but Laurent told him to focus on his own problems. At the Ibrahim residence, Sam insisted he was against hiring Edamura as a mechanic, arguing that they didn't need anyone else since the races were rigged. Clark silently left, assuring Sam he had no complaints. Later, Abby approached Laurent to address the comment of Louis being a soldier, wanting more details, giving no f***s about his power pole hanging out. Meanwhile, Edamura was out checking the stalls but got ambushed by masked men. He tried to fend them off but got captured easily. But when someone mumbles that it's too soon, they suddenly left without him. The next morning, Edamura confronted the Ibrahim brothers, accusing them of the attack, but Sam denied involvement and moved on to the real reason he was there. Edamura would be taking a test. His task: make Clark's plane faster. Edamura got to work, fine-tuning the engine, and Sam dismissed his efforts as standard maintenance, but Edamura shot back, calling Sam a noob who couldn't see the value in his work. Clark isn't so fast to dismiss and took the plane out for a spin. After finishing, Sam was unimpressed with the lap time. However, fans ambushed Clark and praised his massive improvement, wondering if he has a new plane. Clark's excited, but when Sam remained stubborn, Edamura bluffed, threatening to work for Cynthia instead. Sam reluctantly reconsidered, sensing Edamura was hiding something. Suddenly, the masked men from last night showed up, shocking Sam and Clark. Edamura begged for mercy, but Sam denied knowing the men. Kim then appeared, claiming the men were sent to deal with Edamura for sabotaging Louis's plane, paralyzing him just for a quick buck in an underground gambling ring. Sam heard gambling ring and his eyes lit up, offering to buy Edamura's pardon and asserted that Edamura belonged to him now. Back at their apartment, Edamura thanked Clark for his support, and Sam promised him the job if he introduced him to the shady gambling world. Soon after, Edamura escorted a disguised Sam into the underground gambling scene, introducing him to Laurent disguised as Mark in the VIP area. With Sam now deep in their web, the team discussed their next move. Meanwhile, Abby revisited the Ferris wheel, holding a coin that held dear memories. After asking Laurent if Louis was really ex-military, Abby got an answer that brought back bad memories. She woke up from another nightmare and was given a pep talk by Cynthia, urging her to take it easy as she rested. Meanwhile, a mysterious racer was being paid off by a driver, who smiled knowingly. Soon, the race started with Clark watching on, while Sam and Edamura visited the special casino, where Sam planned to make big money. Inside, Edamura asked Sam how much he brought. Sam revealed he brought $300,000, shocking Edamura, who suggested he start small. Sam told him, "This is small for me. Maybe you should just get your bread up, Brokey." Ignoring his warnings, Sam went to the counter and placed the entire amount on Abby. Due to his race rigging, Abby won, rewarding Sam with a big payout and impressing the other customers. As Sam left, Laurent congratulated him. In the car afterward, Sam thanked Edamura for introducing him to the casino, and Edamura told him he should go by himself from now on. That night, the team celebrated. Pleased, they baited Sam. Although they hadn't planned to lose so much money in the setup, they figured he would return until he eventually lost big. However, Edamura worried Sam might stop coming after a big win, but Laurent assured him there was nothing to worry about. Sam is an addict, and I'm the dealer. That night, alone with her thoughts, Abby reviewed Lewis's profile on her phone, triggering memories of her past. She recalled a ballet performance that pleased her parents. They happily walked home together after, but their joy was short-lived by a sudden tragic event. Abby jolted awake on her plane, hearing the crowd screaming. At the casino, Sam returned, now betting a whole milli on Abby. When Laurent tried to warn him about the odds, Sam pressed him about the casino's no-limits policy, forcing Laurent to accept the bet. Abby won again, delivering Sam another big win. But as he left, Laurent stopped him, revealing that they knew his real identity as Sam Ibrahim. When Sam argued he was just placing bets, Laurent told him their organization didn't trust liars, prompting security to escort him out. The next day, after his race, Clark praised Edamura's repair work. He teased his brother about his gambling problem, leading to grumbling. Later, back at the hotel, Sam complained until Edamura suggested placing bets on his behalf. Sam reluctantly agreed, giving him $2.5 million and insisting on an escort to the casino, because he obviously doesn't trust him. Edamura returned to the team with the intel. Sam wanted to bet on a racer named Kaio. Laurent then handed a special pill to Cynthia, who knew what to do with it. The plan made Abby leave the room, lost in her memories. She recalled her time as a young trainee forced to kill. On one mission, she and her friends were ambushed, all falling one by one. Abby stared at her coin, a reminder of her hard times, as Edamura watched, wondering what troubled her. The next day, the races resumed as Edamura placed the bet. Sam called to confirm he'd bet on Kaio, aiming to win $7.5 million. At Kaio's garage, Cynthia visited and charmed the team with her sweet biddies, creating a distraction while Abby slipped a pill into their gas tank. After Abby left, Cynthia gave Kaio a playful kiss on the cheek and departed. When the race started, Kaio's plane soon malfunctioned, crashing into the ocean and frustrating Sam with a fat L. That night, the team celebrated their progress, though Edamura remained wary of what awaited him with Sam. Before long, Edamura was seconds away from shitting his pants as Sam held a gun to his head over the L, but Clark calmed him down by reminding him it was his own bet that lost. Later, Edamura returned to the team, reporting that Sam had taken the bait. When he asked about Abby, Cynthia explained she was resting, and Laurent mentioned she still had 2 races left. Edamura remained concerned, sensing she was carrying a heavy burden. Meanwhile, Abby and Louis were also lost in thought, dwelling on their past pains and regrets. After some time, Edamura went to check on Abby, but she wasn't in her room. Isabel passed by, mentioning Abby is on a walk with Louis because of her piqued interest in him as a pilot, surprising Edamura. At a city park, Abby and Louis wandered, eventually reaching a bridge. When Louis questioned her lack of enthusiasm, Abby brushed him off, asking if he was ex-military. He refused to answer, so she pushed further, asking if he was in Baghdad on March 19, 2003, drawing a blade as she demanded answers. She grilled Louis about his past in the Vietnam War, pressing him with a blade to his neck and demanded a body count. Ignoring her threats, Louis then began to stand up, which spooked her, but he finally grabbed her hands, admitting he was the one to drop the bomb. It was just his job. Disgusted by his lack of regret, she threw him back down and went to stab him, but Edamura jumped in just in time, pushing her off. Louis caught his breath while Edamura now faced Abby's knife, and Louis yelled at her, telling her to finish the job. Isabel tried to calm him down, but Louis claimed Isabel would be free of his burden if he were dead, but she denied, telling him that wasn't the answer. Then Abby let go of Edamura, taking a breath. Later, Edamura joined the Ibrahim brothers at the pool, where Sam asked how he planned to win back the casino money. Edamura casually suggested he could just apologize, but Sam shot it down, calling the casino manager a slime. The conversation shifted to Louis, who Sam dismissed as a washed-up veteran. Clark explained that Louis used to be a skilled pilot who taught him to fly, but lost his way after the accident. Hearing that, Edamura comes up with a new idea: show the casino something that makes it clear the team owners aren't working together. The next day, Sam went to the casino, and with a stack of money, promised Laurent he wasn't fixing matches. Hesitant, Laurent led him inside, where he found Cynthia, invited by Sam for the same reason. Sam then placed a bet of $25 million on Clark. Later, Laurent slipped Edamura a sabotage pill, instructing him to put it in Clark's gas tank. Abby was supposed to check on Louis and Isabel, but Edamura hesitated, remembering what went down previously. Later, Edamura met Isabel, who revealed Louis's obsession with flying and his path to becoming a racer. He could have had any job after the war, but he wanted the thrill of flying. Abby, listening in, heard how Louis struggled to recover from his accident, but was still aiming to return to the skies, taking physical therapy in secret, explaining why he was able to stand. Later, Edamura confronted Clark after a run, challenging him about his staged wins. Clark shrugged it off, saying no one was getting hurt, but Edamura pressed him, saying he can't say the same for Louis. Clark snapped and grabbed Edamura, then admitted he was the one that suggested him and Louis had a real race, something he regretted ever since. After Clark stormed off, Edamura looked at the pill, questioning his mission. That evening, Abby found a capsule machine, recalling Edamura's pep talk about luck. She met up with him, proudly showing off a samurai figure she'd won. Edamura tried to cheer her up, but she brushed him off, saying she couldn't understand Edamura's strange English. Later, Edamura, Abby, Louis, and Isabel gathered. Edamura told Louis about Clark's regrets and accused him of tipping off Sam. Realizing he'd been caught, Louis admitted he'd confronted Sam, demanding a real race for Clark's sake. Edamura assured Louis they'd handle the situation. Meanwhile, at the casino, Laurent was prepping for the upcoming race. Suddenly, Kim's team walk in, and Laurent claims it's time to renovate. Race day is here, and Abby's dressed up, but someone else is in her plane. The team asks if this is a good idea, but she claims this is just the type of thing Laurent would do, so don't worry. Just then, Clark calls Abby over and snatches her close and says something that shocks her. Soon after, Clark took his position, and as the race began, Clark noticed Abby's plane doing familiar tricks that she isn't known for. He quickly realizes Louis is in the plane and it's time for an overdue rematch. As the race is neck and neck, Edamura and the crew look on, eager to see who wins. However, Sam felt worried that Abby was actually trying to win and go against their arrangement. With the stakes so high, the planes cross the finish line, and suddenly red fireworks go off, symbolizing Clark as the winner. Clark brings his plane close to Louis and gives him a thumbs up for a good match, but Louis gives him a loving middle finger, claiming he didn't get to warm up. Meanwhile, Isabel cried tears of joy at Louis's return to form. Edamura looks to Abby as she looks to her ballet medal and asks if she still hates him. She doesn't answer, but he realizes she already forgave him. Flashback to the plane. Louis snatches her close and tells her he's sorry for what he did back then. In the casino, Sam is flabbergasted to see Abby declared the winner on the screen, and purple fireworks going off. He'd lost everything, and Laurent refused to help, saying, "It is what it is," forcing Sam to flee to his guards. When he got outside, he realized he'd been fooled as he found out Clark actually won. When Abby and Edamura got to the casino to apologize, they're puzzled to find out Laurent rigged it to make it look like Abby won. Turns out, Laurent was 2 steps ahead, and the night before, his team set up color-changing glass and a new screen to show Abby as the winner. Now, he sailed away with the crew and his stack of cash, marveling at his hemi-neutron brain. Meanwhile, back at the casino, Sam busted in with a shotty, wanting nothing but blood. He counted down, but Edamura told Abby not to give up just yet. Sam took the shot, breaking the window, and suddenly Edamura grabs Abby and jumps out, clinching her tight. She then clinches him back and pulls her parachute to save them. As they glided away, Sam's gunfire trailed behind them. Clark celebrated his victory, and Isabel tearfully embraced Louis, thrilled he was back to his old self. On the ship, Laurent was informed that Edamura and Abby landed nearby, and as they lay there, Edamura was relieved to hear Abby was finally giving up her goal of dying, then breaks down with a stupid face from facing his fear of heights, causing Abby to laugh. Sometime later, Cynthia was enjoying the ocean view when Laurent popped up behind her, sketching her like one of his French groupies. After some banter, she suggested they grab dinner at Edamura's place, hoping he'd picked up some French. Meanwhile, at a sushi joint, Edamura was mid-argument with his boss, who barked at him in a language he didn't understand. Fed up, Edamura quit on the spot. When he stepped outside, he bumped into Cynthia and Laurent. That evening, Edamura brought them to a shabby inn, leaving Cynthia's bougie ass disappointed because she was expecting sushi, not leftovers. Laurent couldn't resist poking fun, saying Edamura still couldn't make an honest living. As the guys bickered, Cynthia praised the food, making the host beam with pride. She then spotted a painting on the wall and asked about it. The host explained it was left behind by a guest. Cynthia thought it resembled Montoya's work, and Laurent smugly disagreed, calling it amateur hour. The awkward moment was broken by Marie, dropping dessert. As Edamura lit up at the sight of sweets, her father spoke in French, telling him to get his job back. Of course, Edamura's dumb ass didn't understand a word, and just replied with oui oui, probably the only words he knows in French. Cynthia corrected his ignorance and translated. With that, Edamura reluctantly agreed to return to work. The next morning, Edamura headed back to the sushi shop, stopping at a capsule machine along the way. He won a toy figure of Edward III, which piqued his curiosity enough to look him up later. At the sushi shop, things weren't much better. The chefs ignored him as they looked to a snobby food critic shredding their cooking, throwing the sushi back in the owner's face. Personally, him and I would have to run hands after that, but oh well. Soon after, the wannabe Gordon Ramsay strutted out, leaving the owner defeated. Afterward, the head chef told Edamura they were closing shop and heading back to China, leaving Edamura jobless again. Back at the inn, Edamura learned his home is also shutting down. Unable to understand the host's French, he only caught on when Marie translated, sending him into a panic. That afternoon, while sulking at a cafe, he spotted the same snobby critic and overheard him mention needing art for his collection. Inspired, Edamura concocted a plan to save the inn. He struck a deal with the host to buy the painting for 20,000 euros, convincing them with some rough negotiation and a lot of gesturing. Later, he roped Cynthia into his scheme, begging her to help with what he called a low-stakes con. She reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, Laurent was listening in the whole time. Soon after, Abby joined in, and they started prepping for the con. The plan kicked off with Edamura inflating prices at a local gallery, causing the critic to storm out in frustration, forcing him to come across their gallery instead. Jin then distracted the gallery employee, while Cynthia and Abby planted their counterfeit art. When the critic finally stepped in, Cynthia looked him in the eye and froze at the sight of him. Abby steps up to finish the job, while Cynthia storms out and reveals the guy is a world-renowned auctioneer and art appraiser. However, despite Cynthia's droughts, when the critic views the art piece, he appears very interested and decides to buy it for the displayed 25,000 euros, securing the win. The team celebrated modestly, with Edamura using his share to pay the inn, while Cynthia refused her cut entirely. But the victory was short-lived. That evening, the host turned on the TV, revealing the critic Coleman, gushing about discovering Montoya's lost masterpiece, The Snow of London. It was valued at $20 million. As the news sank in, Edamura was left shell-shocked. When he confronted the team, Laurent couldn't stop laughing at his blunder. While Cynthia reminded Laurent he was the one who dismissed the painting as amateur work, Laurent naturally denied ever saying that because he's a master gaslighter. Frustrated and desperate, Edamura asked how they could get the painting back, and a drunken Cynthia declared they'd take Coleman down for good. Flashed to an art studio, an artist stared at his crossed-out sketches, completely stuck in a creative rut. Frustrated, he left to clear his head and wandered into a nearby cafe. When he ordered his usual, he was surprised to find a new waitress, a younger Cynthia, who cheerfully asked for his order. After fumbling a bit, he settled on an espresso, making her giggle. Meanwhile, at an art auction, the famous Coleman was hyping up a painting. In the audience sat Laurent's team, keeping tabs on the event. The auction kicked off, and the bids quickly climbed, topping out at 200,000 euros from a mysterious lady in blue. Later, Coleman evaluated a painting someone brought to him and scoffed at the 50,000 price tag, declaring it a fake, saying, "I wouldn't even wipe my ass with this. Probably be worth more if I did though." Outside, Abby intercepted him, pleading to work for him, claiming she'd do anything, but Coleman brushed her off, advising her to go out and sell her pussy if that's the case. Elsewhere, Laurent's crew targeted Farrah Brown, heir to the Brown fortune and Coleman's side bitch. Disguised as gardeners, Edamura and Jin approached her, claiming they'd found exotic bugs in her garden, bugs that like to eat wood and fabric of any kind. Triggering her insect phobia, they suggested the pests might be inside her home. Panicked, Farrah let them in to inspect. After checking the usual spots, they pretended to finish up, but Farrah decided to direct them to a hidden gallery filled with her prized art. That evening, Farrah hosted Coleman and was gifted roses. Together, they hung the painting she got recently in a special spot among the secret gallery, admiring their loot. Later, during their pillow talk, Coleman apologized for making her spend so much at the auction. She waved it off, saying she didn't mind, even though he clearly took advantage of her wealth. Unbeknownst to them, Laurent's team listened in via a hidden microphone, just as they start round 2. Annoyed by their lovey-dovey chatter, Edamura switched off the speaker, leaving Laurent disappointed. As the group reviewed their intel, Abby questioned why Farrah let Coleman exploit her. Laurent told her don't hate the player, hate the game, and Edamura teased Abby for not understanding, earning him a mollywop by Abby. Cynthia, deep in thought, remembered her past. She once auditioned for a role at a studio, but was turned away. Frustrated, she vented at the cafe where she worked, as her colleague teased her while she cleaned the counter. That's when she noticed the lonely guy at the table again. She offered him coffee on the house. When she walked away, he nervously asked her to model for one of his paintings. Intrigued, she told him she'd think about it. He introduced himself as Thomas, and she smiled, introducing herself back. Back in the present, Farrah asked Coleman what art piece he wanted most. After some buttering up, he admitted his dream was to own The Snow of London by Montoya. Farrah agreed to help him get it, making him ridiculously giddy. At the crew's apartment, Cynthia handed Edamura a blank canvas and paints, convincing him to try his hand at art. As he begrudgingly began painting, Cynthia was hit with another memory. She'd once visited Thomas's studio and was awestruck by his work. He admitted he'd been stuck in an artistic slump until she inspired him. Over the weeks, they grew close, balancing her rehearsals, cafe shifts, and their budding romance. Eventually, Thomas painted a stunning portrait of Cynthia, a masterpiece they both cherished. In the present, Abby approached Coleman at an auction, pointing to Laurent, claiming he's stalking her. Coleman stuck by her side, scaring Laurent off. Amused, Coleman muttered that Abby's stalking him just the same, and he's still not interested in hiring her. Later, Coleman's big auction began. He worked the room, selling lesser pieces before unveiling The Snow of London by Montoya. Bidding started at 10 million euros, quickly escalating. When Farrah offered 20 million, the room fell silent until Laurent outbid her with 23 million. After a tense back and forth, Laurent sealed the deal at 30 million. Farrah tried to bid higher, but her butler urged her not to, leaving her defeated and Coleman tight as f***. Later, Coleman crashes out on her for not bidding higher, leaving her upset. As he stormed out, he once again ran into Abby, and this time sees an opportunity, hiring her to track down the stalker. That evening, Abby reported their success, worming her way into Coleman's trust. Meanwhile, Edamura sulked about their next move and how they'd cover the $30 million. Cynthia casually reminded him it was his plan, and that she'd already sold some of her assets to fund it, expecting him to pay her back. Edamura protested because he's a broke motherfucker, but Abby assured him they'd make Farah buy the painting back. Laurent chimed in with a twist idea to sell her a counterfeit Snow of London instead. When Edamura asked who could pull off a convincing fake, years ago, Cynthia and Thomas had sold paintings at a market when Coleman appeared. Thomas immediately recognized him and explained Coleman's infamous reputation in the art world. Coleman examined Thomas's work, praising his uncanny ability to replicate famous styles, calling him blessed by heaven in the art of forgery. Back in the present, Edamura spent the night searching for Thomas, starting with a pub where he got cornered by some shady men looking for the same guy. When his attempt to outsmart them failed, one grabbed him. Luckily, the bartender kept it from escalating. Later, Edamura shared with Cynthia that Thomas owed 2 million euros, and Edamura refuses to get mollywopped over this. Cynthia begged him to reconsider, but all he wanted was a meal, and hadn't eaten because his wallet was stolen. When he went for a mysterious canned food in her fridge, she snatched it from him and promised pizza instead. Flashback to Cynthia admiring Thomas's work, which always highlighted her beauty. When she asked about their future after hitting it big, he sketched his dreams in a notebook. The next day, Coleman praised Thomas's talent, calling his forgery a heavenly gift. He followed Thomas and Cynthia to the studio, pitching a deal, forged 3 masterpieces, and Coleman would pass them off as real. Coleman promised Thomas fame after just 10 jobs, convincing him to agree, despite Cynthia's disapproval. Weeks passed, and Thomas churned out forgery after forgery, creating tension between him and Cynthia. One night after finishing a job, he hugged her, but she still wasn't happy about the shady deal. Coleman flaunted Thomas's work to the media, claiming it was authentic, and reporters ate it up. He then introduced Thomas to a new studio for his next forgery. Cynthia stormed out, and Coleman advised Thomas to dump that bitch because she's distracting you from the bag. Sometime later, Thomas showed up for a date with Cynthia, sporting a new look, but Cynthia isn't impressed. She refused to eat as she watched him criticize the wine as cheap, and then asked how long he planned to work for Coleman. His vague response led to an argument, and Cynthia left him to dine solo. Back in the present, Edamura found Thomas, but so did the thugs from the pub. They dragged both of them into an alley, knives in hand. Thinking fast, Edamura promised the thugs Thomas could pay them back with a job, convincing them to let him go. Thomas followed Edamura to a familiar restaurant, where Cynthia waited. Meanwhile, Abby presented Coleman with intel on Laurent, revealing he made money selling art to the mafia. Coleman rewarded Abby by inviting her to sit on his lap, which she begrudgingly accepted. At the restaurant, Cynthia proposed the con of selling a fake to Coleman. However, Thomas was too caught up on her glow-up, dazed at how much she's changed. She fired back saying he's the one who changed first. Thomas apologized, then confessed he hasn't painted in years. Cynthia reassured him, saying his skill hadn't faded. Frustrated, he insulted her new life as a con artist, calling it a bad joke, and stormed out. Elsewhere, Coleman stopped Laurent, confessing he had Abby snoop on him. When Coleman asked him about Snow of London, Laurent confessed he didn't have it on him and sent it to be appraised by someone he trusts, upsetting Coleman. He then told him he's going to sell it at an underground auction and promises to invite him when the time comes. Meanwhile, Edamura visited Thomas's place, finding it filled with portraits of Cynthia. After some emotional prodding, Thomas opened up about the time he went to a museum for forgery inspiration, but saw one of his fakes on display with a young artist sketching it. Realizing how far he strayed from his values, he abandoned his cushy apartment and bought back the forgeries he made, racking up a 2 million euro debt. Edamura then pulled out a can Cynthia saved earlier, revealing a sketch of a wedding ring Thomas had drawn for her years ago, the proposal he never followed up on. Edamura tells him you both haven't changed much at all, convincing Thomas to join the mission. The next day, Edamura took Thomas to a studio to begin the forgery. As he began, Edamura offered to get him anything he needed, but Mans was already locked in, and Edamura no longer existed. Days later, Thomas finished the masterpiece and collapsed on the bed, as Cynthia and Edamura admired the perfect replica. Edamura noted that despite everything, you two would always go to great lengths for each other. When Thomas woke up, Cynthia was already gone. Edamura stared at the forgery, unable to tell the difference. Thomas packed the paintings into 2 briefcases, explaining the original was in the white case and the fake in the black. Before handing them over, Edamura informed Thomas his debt was cleared, and he was finally free. After leaving, Edamura sat by a river deep in thought. While looking to his Edward VIII figure, he made a decision. The next day, Abby delivered Coleman an invitation to the auction. She asked if he was sure Farah would cooperate, pleading that the price may be too much for her. Coleman smugly replied that she's just his puppet, completely under his control. All she needs is some of this good D, then she does anything I want. At Farah's house, she ordered her butler to liquidate all her assets to reclaim the Snow of London. Tim warned against it, but she insisted it was for Coleman. Coleman must really know how to lay some pipe. cause she down bad for real. Under her bed, a hidden microphone recorded everything. The team listened in, and Cynthia declared they'd drained Coleman of 70 million euros. The next morning, Farah and Coleman arrived at the auction with Abby. Edamura, posing as the host, welcomed Kim and Jin, disguised as mafia big shots, and ushered them inside. Abby stayed in the car, handing the butler something she believed could help save Farah from Coleman. Inside, Farah and Coleman took their seats. She observed the room while Coleman sneered at the decor. Suddenly, the lights went out, and Laurent appeared theatrically welcoming the guests. The auction kicked off with a painting Coleman valued at 20,000 euros, but the bidding started at 100,000. Bids soared to 160,000, leaving Coleman disgusted as the supposed mafiosos casually outbid each other. As the auction continued, Coleman grew anxious, realizing he the broke boy in this room. During intermission, Farah overheard Kim and Jin discussing the Snow of London's 70 million euro price tag. Panicked, she rushed out to arrange more money. Her butler urged her to stop and listen to Abby, who handed her a drive with vital information. Back in the auction room, Cynthia takes a seat next to Coleman. He tells her the seat is taken, but she only smiles back just as the bidding for the Snow of London began. Abby walks in and whispers to him that Farah wants you to bid for her, and she can pay up to 70 million. With that news, he takes his chance and bids 60 million. Cynthia jumps in and bids 65 million, shocking the fat man, but he won't back down, and so they go back and forth a few times until he reaches his bid cap of 70 million. Laurent is happy with the turnout, but just before he finalizes the bid, Cynthia jumps in and raises 71 million, shocking everybody in the crowd and thoroughly pissing off Coleman. She then teases him, saying how good it will look over her bed when she's getting busy with her men. His blood boils at the thought, and he impulsively pushed the price up to 100 million, finally giving Cynthia the satisfaction to back down. Laurent accepts the final bid, and Cynthia shakes Coleman's hand to congratulate him, not realizing they just played his bitch ass.
Got him!
Coleman stormed into the executive room, demanding the painting. Laurent asked about payment, but Coleman said someone will be here to pay for it soon. Laurent reminded him the bid was his responsibility, and just then, the painting was presented. With his emotions all tied up, he immediately made the 100 million transfer from his own account. That night, the team celebrated, and Laurent praised Cynthia for her performance. Abby revealed Coleman sold everything he owned to afford the painting. While everyone chatted, Edamura stood by the window, gazing at his William III toy. At Farah's estate, Coleman was locked out, screaming at the gate to be let in. Inside, Farah was devastated as she listened to the recording Abby took of Coleman's sex puppet comment. The butler took the recorder from her and broke it as he promised to stay by her side. The next day, the original Snow of London was hung in Marie's inn. However, Marie noticed something different, prompting Edamura to confess he had swapped the briefcases, prompting Laurent to call him Edamura once again. When Abby asked why he did it, Edamura admitted guilt over Thomas's sleepless nights and canned bean diet while creating the painting. He argued Thomas's work wasn't just a fake, it was a beautiful masterpiece. Surprisingly, Marie preferred the fake, calling it warmer and kinder. Edamura then handed Cynthia the can holding the engagement drawing, telling her it's time to talk to Thomas. Later, Cynthia visited a cafe from her past to meet with him, and after a heartfelt conversation, they shook hands and parted ways. That night, Cynthia threw out the can, closing that chapter of her life. The next day, Edamura returned to the sushi shop with Abby, hoping for a fresh start, only to be rejected by the head chef who didn't want Koreans, despite Edamura being Japanese. Back at the beach, Cynthia confronted Laurent, accusing him of orchestrating the entire scheme for his amusement. She called him a blonde asshole and told him to stop meddling in her past before walking away. Little did she know, Laurent's meddling is just getting started. He's a bigger asshole than she even realizes. On a special night, Laurent took a friend on a mountain trip to see the northern lights. They watched in awe as the sky glittered, their smiles reflecting the magical moment. Then Laurent snapped back to reality when he woke from the dream, as Kim called him to breakfast, quickly making his power pole descend. At the table, Laurent cracked open a can of beer, surprising Cynthia since it was so early. When Edamura appeared, dramatically faking his death, the group didn't buy it, telling him he's still a fat noob and has a lot to learn. Annoyed, he got up, accusing them of being heartless bastards. Laurent dragged him outside for a talk, and the two discussed the art of con men. Edamura admitted he still disliked Laurent, but confessed he disliked himself more for starting to believe his own lies. At the end of their conversation, Laurent said goodbye, advising him to keep his eyes open and trust where the wind takes him. Edamura then handed him his beloved Hideyoshi toy and made his leave. The next day, Edamura flew back to Japan, noticing many signs promoting a trading company. Determined to live an honest life, he landed a job interview with them. During the interview, the manager questioned him about his family, criminal record, and world travels. Despite everything, he hired Edamura as a trainee on the spot. Edamura thanks him greatly, but the man just asks him not to get caught by police again. After a week of office labor, Edamura was brought to the top of a building where they all greeted a woman as she exited her chopper. The manager introduced Edamura to the chairman, Souza, who gave him a brief assessment before wishing him luck, finalizing his employment, officially making him a full-time employee. A week later, they traveled to Vietnam. At a remote shed, Edamura was introduced to a group of children, leaving him horrified. When he confronted the manager, he coldly referred to them as merchandise, confirming Edamura's worst fears. Powerless to act, Edamura followed along as they transported the children to Japan. At the cargo office, a clerk tried intimidating Edamura with the threat of a search, but it was clear the clerk had been bribed. Once in Japan, Souza assessed the children, reminding her team that revenue was dropping and threatened them to step up their game. She then told Edamura to attend the auction when it begins. As they left, the manager mentioned that Souza seemed to like Edamura since she remembered his name, something he didn't have the pleasure of until 2 years in. At the auction, Edamura saw children being scolded and ordered to smile, filling him with disgust. The auction soon started and the children were sold one by one. Suddenly, Laurent's words of following the wind echoed in Edamura's mind as he remembered the signs leading him to this company. He pieced together that Laurent had set him up, landing him in this sinister place. Personally, I think that connection is far-fetched, but Laurent is pretty crafty. That night, Edamura called Laurent furious. Laurent brushed off his anger, telling him this was all for one big final send-off. He promised that with the help of some old friends, they'd take down Souza's corporation for good. Elsewhere, Laurent and Abby arrived at their destination in hopes of getting help from an old ally, Clark Ibrahim. At Souza Corporation, Edamura informed the manager that the food for the kids was ready. They served it, but the kids refused to eat. Afterward, the manager handed Edamura the keys, instructing him to return them to the box. That night, Edamura called Laurent and said he was done with the operation. Laurent agreed he could quit, but when the topic of the children came up, Edamura's empathetic heart kicked in, and he changed his mind, asking for the next step. The next day, Cynthia and Kim arrived in Japan, ready for the next phase. Cynthia posed as an English trader, with Kim as her translator. At Souza Corporation, she pretended not to know Edamura, calling him president, which the manager quickly corrected. During the meeting, Cynthia offered to sell her merchandise to them because she's trying to expand, but when the manager seemed uninterested, she suggested she'd just take her business to Shanghai. He then assured her they only take top-of-the-line product, and so they responded by offering a princess. Later, they took the Souza workers to a remote location, claiming they were here to kidnap the sister of an Arabian prince named Sam Ibrahim. They staged the kidnapping perfectly. Presenting the manager with Princess Abigail Ibrahim. The clueless manager bought the act entirely. After the operation, Laurent shed his disguise and thanked Clark for playing the role of Sam. Once the jeeps were far from Sam's convoy, the manager stopped to check the princess and confirmed the story. Later, he brought Abby to Souza, who interrogated her. When Souza ordered Edamura to strip her, Abby slapped his hand away, but Souza repeated the command. Reluctantly, Edamura complied. Souza then commanded her to let the biddies out, but this time Abby isn't letting Edamura touch her. Instead, he blocked the manager's view out of defiance because he's still a bashful virgin. After assessing Abby, Souza shifted to negotiations with Cynthia. When Souza offered only $100 million, Cynthia threatened to take her business to Shanghai, forcing Souza to up the bid, but not before she displayed her dominance by grabbing her biddy and calling her old. Cynthia was stoic, but I'm damn sure she was thinking, if this raggedy old bitch don't get her damn hands off me, I'm gonna shove both my fists, a foot, and a damn lamppost 10 feet. The deal was sealed at $1 billion, and Abby became their merchandise. Later, they put her in the back room under surveillance. After, Edamura returned home to find the team snuck into his apartment to surprise him, and celebrated their 1 billion yen. He pushed them out with fear of getting caught, and so they left rescuing Abby up to him. But before he could relax, he got a call to join manager Ishigami at a pub. Over drinks, they discussed who might take over the corporation once Souza was gone. The manager wants the role, but feels threatened by the liking the chairman has shown to Edamura. Once Ishigami finally drank himself into a stupor, Edamura made his move to copy the key. The next morning, Gin discreetly delivered the copy to Edamura's door, and the final plan began. That night, Edamura convinced the last security officer to leave, saying he'd handle things. Once alone, he freed Abby, and they escaped to a waiting car where Laurent was parked. But Edamura's stupid Grinch-sized heart couldn't leave the children behind, surprising no one, and so he went back to rescue them with Abby's help. Meanwhile, the officer who had left realized he forgot something and made his way back. Inside, Edamura tried to help the children escape, but they refused, saying they had nowhere to go. As the officer approached, Edamura's window to act narrowed. When the officer checked the monitors and noticed Abby was missing, he rushed to her room, only to find her still there. Edamura plays it off like he was just in the bathroom, and with the officer confused, he decides he can't trust Edamura enough anymore, and maintains his post for the night. While monitoring the system together, the officer offered Edamura a cigarette, and puts the peer pressure on 11, forcing Edamura to take a few first-time puffs. The next morning, Edamura walked home, Haunted by his failure and the kid's hopeless words, memories of his father surfaced, filling him with a sense of defeat as he returned home. As a kid, Edamura learned classical Chinese from his mom. His dad, Ozaki, was a traveling lawyer, so when he came back from one of his trips to handle a case in Japan, Edamura was thrilled. The family shared a peaceful moment walking into the sunset, but the joy didn't last. Ozaki was arrested years later as part of a smuggling ring. After his dad's conviction, Edamura tried to care for his mom, cheering her up with capsule toys he occasionally got. Sadly, his efforts weren't enough. She passed away in the hospital, leaving Edamura alone and pushing him into a life of crime. At Suzacorp, Edamura checked on the kids before visiting Abby's room, where he dropped off a bacon burger and a drink. They briefly discussed fixing the plan he'd messed up before Edamura left, now fully accustomed to smoking. The next morning, Ishigami called Edamura, saying the chairman wanted to see him. Later that day, Edamura met with Suza, who asked if he understood Chinese. He confirmed he'd learned classical Chinese as a kid. Hearing this, Suza assigned him as her new translator for an upcoming visit from the Shanghai group. After the meeting, Edamura asked Ishigami about Shanghai. The manager explained that Shanghai Trading was Suza's Chinese branch, originally formed with small gangs. However, as the Chinese economy boomed, the branch outgrew its parent company and stopped paying homage to Suza. Now led by a new boss, Liu, they had become greedy and defiant. The Shanghai group soon arrived, and Edamura froze when he saw the familiar face of their translator, snapped out of it by Ishigami. Edamura followed as the guests headed to Suza's office. The meeting began with both sides trading insults, forcing the translators to smooth things over. When Suza asked about Liu's absence, the Shanghai translator apologized, saying Liu was unwell. Suza demanded 80% of Shanghai's revenue, but Chen slammed the table and refused. Undeterred, Suza reminded them their success came from her name, and that it was in their best interest to comply, leading to the meeting ending with no resolution. Afterward, Edamura asked Ishigami about the translator. He revealed his name was Oz, and that he'd been released from prison years ago, now working with Shanghai as their interpreter and lawyer. Realizing this was his father, Edamura ran off in a fury. At a lakeside bridge, Laurent was flirting with women when Edamura suddenly clotheslines the mother.
Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
Furious, Edamura accused the blonde asshole of orchestrating the reunion between him and his father. Laurent doesn't deny, and Edamura claims his father means nothing to him now, and tells him to leave the man out of it. Laurent counters the statement by pointing out how triggered he is, prompting Edamura to storm off. Later, Edamura told Abby about everything and outlined their next escape attempt, set for 3 a.m. Abby stopped him before he left, reminding him that their situations weren't so different. She planted the idea that his father might need saving too, leaving Edamura deep in thought. At a sushi bar, Chen drank heavily while Oz watched silently. Back at the hotel, Chen took women to his room, while Oz went alone. Suddenly, Edamura ambushed his father into the room. During their tense conversation, Oz tries to deny knowing him, but Edamura tells him to cut the shit, prompting him to let his guard down. He explained that he tried to visit after he got out but was too ashamed to show his face to them. Soon after, he was recruited by Shanghai and started a new life. Edamura isn't buying his words, but when he sees Oz still wears his wedding ring, he decides to let his Grinch heart win and invited his dad to escape with them and the children. At 3 a.m., the mission began. While the guard on duty slept, Edamura and Oz freed Abby first, then moved on to the children's room. Edamura used Oz's gun to scare the children into cooperating. Everyone boarded the bus where Cynthia was waiting, and they sped off, believing they'd escaped cleanly. But their hope was short-lived. The Japanese group intercepted the bus, blocking their path. Ishigami ordered the adults off the bus while his men boarded to control the children. Disappointed, Ishigami confronted Edamura but then called out Oz, revealing the betrayal. Shocked, Edamura realized his father sabotaged the plan and decides to crash out, but Oz quickly pulls a bitch you thought and lays a gun up to his head, leaving Edamura shook as Oz declares this life is his truth now. Later, at Sagami Bay, they were put on a ship and tied down, and Suza began her clowning at the absurdity, quoting an ancient J. Cole proverb, "Fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't put the blame on you. Fool me 3 times, fuck the peace sign. Load the chopper, well you know the rest." She grabbed Abby, taunting her to beg for mercy if she wanted to live. When Abby refused, Suza ordered her men to take Abby and Cynthia to the edge of the boat. When Edamura tried to intervene, Suza stopped him, saying he wasn't in the same boat ironically. She freed him thanks to Oz's plea. However, as soon as Oz untied him, Edamura grabbed his father's collar, screaming in rage. Ignoring his son's outburst, Oz told Edamura to prove his loyalty by killing the con men. Edamura refused, standing his ground. Cynthia, sensing the stakes, told him to go ahead and do it, claiming they weren't friends or partners anyway. Before she could finish, Oz shot her and Abby. The two fell into the bay and Edamura went into shock, followed by a blind rage, and tackled his father, ready to kill him, but Sousa's workers restrained him. In a shocking twist, Sousa turned on Oz, revealing her Kyrie triple cross, never intending to make peace with Shanghai, and only used Oz to further her vendetta. She used Edamura's rage to her advantage, giving him permission to kill Oz if he wanted. Stunned, Oz tried pleading with his son, but Edamura coldly reminded him of how much he made his mother suffer. With much hesitation, Edamura pulled the trigger, sending him into the bay. With his father gone, Edamura collapsed emotionally. Sousa patted him on the back, assuring him he would be fine. 3 days later, Sousa visited Edamura in Abby's former room. He hadn't eaten or moved since the incident. She dismissed Ishigami and tried to feed Edamura herself, shoving a spoon into his mouth. When he slapped it away, she calmed him with a nod, breaking through his resistance, finally letting it all out. 2 months later, Edamura was a dedicated worker at Sousa Corp, sporting a sharp new hairstyle and earning Sousa's trust. He was so close to her now that she invited him to her home. She assigned him to oversee the auction that day, and he complied. Later, Edamura boarded a helicopter with Sousa, handing her a small toy cat. When she asked about it, he explained it was something he once gave his mom and thought Sousa might like it. They arrived at the auction house, where Edamura prepped the children. One by one, he presented them to the highest bidders. As one child walked away, they looked back at Edamura with confusion and sadness, questioning how someone who once wanted to save them could now give them away so easily. The next day, Sousa surprised Edamura by offering him a room in her house, shocking both him and Ishigami. On their way home, Ishigami pulled Edamura aside, questioning Sousa's intentions and warning him about the lurking Shanghai group. After a tense exchange, he dropped Edamura off at his doorstep, where Edamura encountered an unexpected guest. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, Chen reported to Liu, who asked about Oz's whereabouts. Chen admitted they hadn't found him. When he questioned why Liu cared so much about a translator, Liu explained the importance of a trusted translator in global business, likening it to a writer losing a Nobel Prize due to poor translations. Elsewhere in Shanghai, Laurent interrupted someone's bad meal, paid them off, and headed to Shanghai trading. Before entering, he kissed a ring chain around his neck, a gesture that seemed to symbolize someone important to him. Inside, he was stopped by gangsters who refused to let him through. Unfazed, Laurent told them to inform Liu that he was there. Back at Edamura's house, Oz appeared unexpectedly, and Edamura, surprisingly calm, gave him a chance to explain. So Oz started from the beginning, with Laurent's backstory. As a kid, Laurent studied hard at his mother's shop in Brussels. When a customer asked what he was studying for, Laurent explained he wanted to become a diplomat so he can take his mom out the hood, as she looks to him proudly. A few days later, she invested in Laurent's education by paying a fee to a management agency. However, weeks later, Laurent discovered she'd been scammed. His mom argued with the agency over the phone, but they claimed no record of her payment. With no idea how she's going to pay rent, that night while cooking, she collapsed from the stress. Days later, Laurent attended her funeral at a church. Years later, Laurent had become a poker player, hustling at bars. After a big win, he celebrated with cheering women, but sore losers ganged up on him and beat him senseless. He woke up in the trash the next morning, lit a cigarette, and spied on a couple entering a hotel. That night, Laurent bought a pocket knife and followed the man from the couple. When the man walked out, Laurent stalked him, knife in hand. As Laurent lunged, the woman from the couple stepped in the way. The blade pierced her gut. Laurent froze as the man screamed her name, Dorothy. Laurent bolted from the scene, leaving the man clutching his lover's lifeless body. A car screeched to a stop nearby, and a familiar face offers the grieving man help. As the lover places her in the car, the familiar man cruelly speeds off before he could get in. Later, Laurent was taken by a woman who led him into a sketchy apartment. To his shock, the woman he thought he had stabbed earlier was alive and well, chatting like a motor mouth about how he'd made their mission easier. Still dazed, Laurent asked who these people were. Dorothy, the ringleader, proudly introduced them as con artists targeting Hugo, the man Laurent had tried to attack. Dorothy spilled the details. Hugo was a scammer who swindled struggling families to fund his shady investment firm. Dorothy seduced Hugo to gain his trust, then exploited Laurent's rage to make Hugo fall into a sympathy trap. The scam ended with Hugo buying bogus stocks and hitting financial rock bottom. When Laurent called them criminals, Dorothy scoffed, claiming they only con bad guys. She introduced herself as the best con artist alive, Kim as a former honey trap pro, and Ozaki as the mastermind planner, the Wizard of Oz. Then Dorothy struck a dramatic pose on the balcony and invited Laurent to join their crew. After some hesitation, Laurent agreed, curious about the life of a con artist. Their first job took them to Sao Paulo, where they tried to sell a man a barren wasteland. After he cruelly declined, he ran into Laurent and Dorothy, posing as real estate tycoons, and overheard their conversation to invest in the land he just declined. The man quickly spun the block and decided to buy the land none the wiser, and the team celebrated their victory. Next, they moved on to Italy, where they scammed an AC Milan executive into believing the club's owners were secretly selling out the club to Japan, pointing out Oz currently talking with the owner. After Dorothy claimed that she believed the club belongs to Italy, The executive showed his racism by agreeing and investing to keep the team Italy owned. Later, the team partied back at their apartment with another victory, using a cool 10 milli as a food tray. Blasphemy. Later that night, Dorothy rambled endlessly about their missions, voicing her initial doubts about Laurent joining the team. Fed up, Laurent silenced her with a kiss, and one thing led to another as they shared a romantic moment overlooking the Eiffel Tower. The next week, Dorothy found herself in trouble after conning an Australian mafia gang with fake oyster deals. Just before things turned deadly, the police arrived, scaring the gang off. Disguised as a cop, Laurent freed her, but Dorothy was more worried about her briefcase full of cash, leaping into the getaway car without him. Damn, she chasing the bag for real. Months of cons passed, and one morning Laurent's creepy ass watched Dorothy sleep. When she woke up, he complimented her necklace, which held a ring she considered a lucky charm. He then suddenly asked her to stop conning, claiming it won't last forever and someone could end up dead. When she refused, he suddenly proposed to her, but Dorothy shot him down, calling marriage a repugnant contract. Clearly she's for the streets, but he got the rose-colored glasses on and persisted anyway. As he hugged her, she began to waver and suggested they go see somewhere she always wanted to. Fulfilling Dorothy's wish, Laurent took her to see the northern lights. Mesmerized by the glittering sky, Dorothy hugged him from behind and accepted his proposal, with the condition that their life together would always be fun. He agreed and sealed the deal with a kiss. Back at the apartment, the couple shared the news with Kim and Oz, who were thrilled. However, Dorothy had one last request. She wanted to go out with a bang on one final con. Reluctantly, Laurent agreed. Their new target is a Shanghai trading ring dealing in illegal goods. Laurent gained the leader Liu's trust by defeating him at Mahjong. During a meeting in an elevator, a mysterious attacker struck, and Laurent shielded Liu, earning credibility within the gang. A few weeks later, after a fake recovery period, Laurent returned to Liu's circle with massive street cred and was hired as a translator. Later, Oz posed as a mysterious figure who bought out all the merchandise at one of Liu's auctions to gain his trust. However, he plans to secretly find foster parents for the children, because he's not a monster. He then asked Liu if they had any more super special merchandise for sale. With that in mind, Laurent introduced Liu to Kim, posing as a broker who could get him an Ethiopian princess. Meanwhile, Dorothy lounged under an umbrella in Kyoto, sipping juice and preparing for the next phase of the plan, posing as the so-called princess. Before kicking off the plan, the team asked Dorothy how she'd convince the Shanghai group she was an Ethiopian princess. Dorothy had no real answer. She just raised her glass, toasted their last mission, and told everyone to have fun. When the mission began, Kim and Oz presented photos of Dorothy as the supposed princess, claiming she was visiting Japan for cultural reasons. Liu was skeptical at first, but Kim cleverly suggested to take the deal to their rival Souza Corp, prompting Liu to cave. The next day, the team staged a fake kidnapping, ambushing Dorothy's bodyguard and whisking her away. Once they were gone, Oz paid off the actor playing the bodyguard. Soon after, they delivered Dorothy to Liu. When he tried to check under her clothes, she slapped him hard and cursed him out. Stung but impressed, Liu completed the deal, letting Kim and Ozaki slip away. On the boat leaving the Shanghai group, Oz bid farewell to Kim, entrusting her with the money for Laurent and Dorothy. He explained that the mission's escape plan was up to them. At her makeshift prison, Dorothy complained to Laurent about the terrible conditions and begged him to bring soup dumplings. Laurent assured her the escape car would be ready by morning, sealing the promise with a kiss. But the next morning, just as Laurent grabbed the dumplings, he saw a newspaper revealing that the real Ethiopian descendant was meeting with government officials. Panicking, Laurent sprinted back to Dorothy's hideout. As Dorothy swatted a cockroach in her dingy room, Chen knocked her out and dragged her to Liu, who showed Laurent the damning newspaper article. Back in Japan, Oz was about to reunite with his family when Laurent's urgent message warned him to run. Realizing the mission had gone south, Oz called Kim, abandoning his reunion to plan Dorothy's rescue. On the cruise ship, Liu demanded Dorothy reveal the whereabouts of Kim and the money. Despite Laurent's protests, he was forced to translate. Dorothy blurted out nonsense, telling them she hid the money in rolls of toilet paper at the airport, so they better go get it before shits get real. She then speaks directly to Laurent, reminding him of their rule, screw up and we'll dump you. Laurent panicked, but once Liu asked him to translate, she suddenly tells Liu to die you dumb fuck, in plain Japanese to make sure he understood. Enraged, he prepared to hit her, but Chen interrupted, announcing a call from the lawyer. Oz claimed he was also fooled by Kim and the girl, then revealed Kim's location to Liu's men, who rushed to Seoul. They narrowly missed her in the room but spotted her and engaged a high-speed chase. Suddenly, Kim turns a corner and crashed her car, resulting in an explosion. With her gone, the gang went back to her room and recovered the money hidden under her bed. Liu decided there was no need for further violence and declared Oz's lawyer persona would commit seppuku and leave a will. However, when asked about Dorothy, Liu vindictively told them no bitch calls me a dumb fuck and gets away with it. Just then she was shot and shoved off the boat. Laurent could only watch in anguish as she disappeared into the dark water. As they drive off, he finds her lucky charm ring by his feet. A week later, Oz turned himself in to Japanese authorities, blaming himself for Dorothy and Kim's demise. Laurent, devastated, remained trapped in Liu's service, playing mahjong with the man who destroyed his life. Fantasizing about revenge, Laurent found himself unable to act. When Liu asked why he was distracted, Laurent lied, saying his mother was ill, and secured leave to temporarily exit Shanghai. Returning to their apartment in France, Laurent clung to hope that Dorothy had somehow survived. After fruitless searching, he descended into despair. One day Kim visited, finding him big sad over the L. He lost his confidence, he lost the money, and he lost his bitch. Kim apologized for disappearing and urged Laurent to snap out of it, reminding him Dorothy wouldn't respect his pity party. After she left, Laurent clung to Dorothy's ring, hallucinating her presence only to find a stray cat on the balcony. Soon after, he realized he needed to honor her memory another way. He sent a letter to Oz, asking him to draft a plan Dorothy would have loved, pointing out he doesn't care how long it takes. Years later, Laurent traveled to London, where he recruited Cynthia after catching her in a failed con. Meanwhile, Oz was released from prison and visited his estranged wife in the hospital. His son, Edamura, bitterly dismissed him as a failure who abandoned his family. After Edamura stormed out, Oz tried to reconcile with his wife. In an American park, Abby demolished a group of sleazy challengers in a fight, only to be approached by Laurent, who recruited her into his team with a hefty payout. Back in Shanghai, Oz returned to Liu's trading company and offered his services, which Liu accepted. Finally, in Japan, Edamura attempted to con Laurent using a wallet trick, unknowingly walking into Laurent's grand plan. Edamura would be his final recruit. Before diving into Oz's new plan, Laurent caught Cynthia and Abby up on everything that had happened so far. The plan began with Edamura shooting Oz, sending him tumbling into the ocean. Kim released a dummy to fool the Japanese traders, then swam the real Oz to a nearby boat where Cynthia and Abby were waiting. With the plan going off without a hitch, Laurent praised Cynthia and Abby for their work, but they brushed him off, complaining about the stress he's putting them through. Laurent passed the blame to Oz, who apologized for the risks he'd taken with their lives. The women weren't having it though, and turned their complaints back to the blonde asshole. The conversation shifted to Edamura, who had been left with the riskiest parts of the plan and placed under Souza's watch. Laurent explained that Edamura's overly emotional nature made him terrible at keeping secrets, so it was safer to keep him in the dark. Abby agreed, and the group decided Oz should be the one to fill him in on the plan when it came time. Back in Shanghai, Liu and Chen eagerly prepared a crab dinner to welcome Laurent back. They asked why he had been absent for so long, and Laurent spun a tale about his mother's death and years spent managing her business. Liu, satisfied with the explanation, invited Laurent to rejoin the team, noting that his previous translator had been eliminated by Souza. Laurent agreed, and the night ended with a celebratory toast and a game of mahjong. Meanwhile, at Edamura's house, his father came clean about the past. Furious, Edamura told his father he wished the bullet had been real, accusing him of prioritizing Dorothy's memory over their family. When Oz tried to explain he'd been protecting them, Edamura snapped, declaring he no longer saw Oz as a father. Despite the bitterness, Edamura promised to follow the plan. As he left, Edamura made a cryptic phone call to a mysterious contact. At a hotel in Shanghai, Laurent sat on a couch, hallucinating. Speaking to the imagined Dorothy, he vowed to see the plan through. Oh man, he down bad. The next day, Edamura served Souza a new blend of coffee. Pleased with his diligence, she gifted him a tie, even placing it on him herself. She then prepared for a conference call with Liu's team in Shanghai. During the meeting, Laurent and Edamura exchanged subtle signals, coordinating the next phase of the plan. Initially translating properly, they soon began feeding both sides misinformation, escalating tensions between Liu and Souza. By the meeting's end, both leaders believed the other demanded 100 billion yen, agreeing to a contract neither wanted. Afterward, Laurent persuaded Liu to pay in real cash to avoid complications, countering Chen's suggestion to print counterfeit money. Meanwhile, Souza dismissed Ishigami's idea to issue a fake check, refusing to stoop to the level of Shanghai scum. Later, at Souza Corp, Edamura suggested repainting the office to impress the Shanghai traders. Ishigami unveiled a new chair for Souza, instructing her to press a hidden button. When the first button failed to work, he sheepishly revealed a second one, which produced a katana. Souza suddenly swung it with no hesi, slicing her monitor in half and vowing to eliminate Liu next. At the same time in Shanghai, Chen handed Liu a ring with a hidden needle, explaining it could poison enemies. Laurent suggested using it to take over Souza Corp, confusing Liu and Chen by switching to English mid-sentence. That evening, Edamura visited a pub with a very drunk Ishigami, who rambled about Souza's leadership. He revealed that she inherited the company reluctantly after her son ran away, and implied she saw Edamura as a potential successor, gifting him a tie identical to the one she'd given her son. Back at Laurent's apartment, he called the team, who were relaxing at a hot spring. Jin proposed a toast to the plan's success, praising Oz for his brilliance. Meanwhile, at the women's bath, Cynthia tried to reassure a worried Abby that Edamura would be fine. Abby wasn't convinced, saying Edamura always does some reckless shit at the end when his emotions are involved. He's likely to do it again. Similarly, Oz is also concerned about him growing too close to Souza, seeing him as a potential wild card. Oz confided in Kim, unsure if Edamura's involvement might jeopardize their mission. They decided to leave it to fate, betting on which of the two, Edamura or Laurent, might sabotage the plan. At home, Edamura prepared for bed, but made another cryptic call to his mysterious contact before turning in. Laurent, meanwhile, stared out his hotel room window with a devious glint in his eye. On the day of the big event, Edamura suited up and left his building. On the way, he stopped at a capsule toy machine and scored a Sengoku-themed capsule, which he pocketed with a faint smile. At the Shanghai Trading Center, Liu's men confirmed the 100 billion yen sum in a briefcase. Laurent, unfazed, informed the group it was time to head to Japan. On the flight, he handed out wine to counteract any poison Souza's group might try, while Liu fiddled nervously with his needle ring. At Souza's house, Edamura brewed her usual coffee. After a sip, Souza admitted she'd never liked coffee, until Edamura started making it, leaving him visibly moved. She finished her cup, and the pair boarded her helicopter for the final meeting with Liu. While preparing for the meeting, Souza dropped a bombshell. She was retiring from Souza Corporation after this deal. She asked him if he would stay by her side in retirement, and Edamura froze at the thought, but she waved off his concern, claiming it was just a joke. When Liu's group arrived in Japan, they were diverted into separate cars due to traffic, which raised Laurent's concern. At a building near Souza Corp, mercenaries armed to the teeth stood ready to ensure Liu's victory. The Shanghai group entered Souza Corp, guided by underlings into an elevator. In a surveillance van nearby, the rest of Laurent's team, disguised as officers, watched the unfolding chaos. They placed bets on who would mess up first, Laurent or Edamura, as Jin rallied the group for backup. At the meeting floor, Liu's group was searched by Ishigami and some Japanese guards, while Edamura confirmed the contents of their briefcase. Only Liu, Laurent, and Chen were allowed to proceed, with Souza insisting on keeping the group small for safety. Inside, Liu extended a handshake to Souza, poison needle primed in his ring. She declined with a cold glare, and as he noticed a strange button on her chair, he stepped back. As they began discussing the contract, Laurent and Edamura's mistranslations caused confusion, pushing Chen to open the briefcase and Ishigami to present the check. The two leaders looked to their translators for answers. The boys stayed quiet when suddenly police burst in, confiscating the briefcase and check while ordering everyone to stay put. Souza, perplexed by the perfect timing, accused Liu of harboring a snitch. Liu looked at Laurent, who smiled smugly, earning an angry outburst from Chen. Then Laurent made a shocking move, grabbing Liu, wrestled the ring from him, and stabbed him in the neck with the needle. The room erupted in panic. Liu lunged at Laurent but tripped and crashed onto the table. Souza demanded answers, but Gin grabbed her arm, declaring her under arrest. Before she could react, Edamura unsheathed her hidden katana, pointing it at Gin and swearing to protect Souza. A hail of gunfire followed as unknown armed men stormed in. Old fat man Kasano appeared, smugly announcing his return and explaining how he had aligned with Sam and Coleman to orchestrate revenge. Kasano ordered his men to unmask Abby, Cynthia, and Kim, leaving everyone stunned. Souza demanded an explanation, and Edamura gleefully revealed the con artist's true nature, calling Kasano his ally in exposing them. He mocked Oz's master plan while Kasano recorded the chaos. Kasano handed Souza the briefcase and check, laughing maniacally about finally outwitting the blonde asshole. When Oz asked him to stop, Edamura snapped. He accused Oz of abandoning his family to avenge Dorothy, calling him a failure who let his mother die alone. Edamura grabbed his blade and threatened Oz, but before he could strike, Laurent intervened, pleading with him to stop. Edamura turned his rage on Laurent, calling him a low-life con artist who exploited others. Laurent responded, claiming Edamura is f***ing up and will be left behind. Just as tensions peaked, Ozaki stepped in and slashed Edamura, spilling blood across the room, shocking Souza. Chaos erupted as the team launched a counterattack, scattering Kasano's men and setting off a gas canister. Amid the mayhem, Ishigami and Chen dragged their respective bosses to safety. When the gunfire suddenly stopped, they decided to return to the room only to find it empty. Souza then noticed a lever she'd never seen before and curiously pulled it, triggering a bizarre mechanism that lowered the entire room like an elevator. When they emerged, they found themselves on a mysterious island surrounded by endless sea. Speechless, Liu sneezed, and with that, the building and contraptions crumbled into ruins. A few days after the chaos, Liu's men scavenged the island, gathering food and wood to survive. They used scraps from the collapsed fake building to spell out help on the ground, hoping for rescue. Meanwhile, Souza sat smoking, reflecting on her life and wondering how it had gone so wrong. Nearby, Ishigami loses his shit and bursts out yelling for help. Edamura inherited his love for capsule toys from his mother, who treasured a wizard figurine above all else. On the day of the operation, he prepared meticulously until a brief encounter with Abby. She reminded him to forgive himself, recalling his own words to her, then pulled a Batman vanish, leaving him confused. He spun the capsule machine and called the mysterious voice, Kasano. Edamura begged him not to kill Laurent, but to stick to their deal. Kasano agreed, motivated by the hefty payout. Sam and Coleman, however, refused to join, claiming they wouldn't risk their lives for this. Before the meeting, Edamura drugged Souza and Ishigami's drinks, ensuring they'd be unconscious when the time came. He redirected their helicopter to a different location without their knowledge. Simultaneously, Laurent spiked champagne on Lou's jet, knocking out his bodyguards. When Lou's team landed, they were taken to Edamura's old garage, where a contact provided them with emergency rations and transport to the island. On the island, the rest of the con artists worked to recreate Souza Corp's building, complete with the chair from her office. Cynthia added a creepy cat statue, which Oz questioned, but she brushed off his concerns. Just as they were about to take the elevator down, Souza arrived ahead of schedule, forcing them to disappear another way. Souza walked in noticing the odd cat statue, but Edamura cleverly dismissed the addition as his own. He offered to remove it, but she decided to keep it. As he closed the door, he noticed them hiding in a room nearby and gave them a bird in frustration. Laurent's team arrived shortly after, swapping Lou's poisoned ring needle for a harmless one. Lou's group, disoriented and angry, stumbled into the shabby fake building. The meeting commenced, with Edamura's usual antics adding chaos. Both sides eventually fled, locking the doors behind them as Kasano's men fired blanks, simulating a fierce gunfight. Oz signaled that the coast was clear, and Edamura activated the hidden elevator to escape with the group. On the getaway boat, they toasted their success and laughed about Edamura's stunt, impressed he was able to fool them. He revealed he rented props and henchmen to give Laurent a taste of his own medicine. Kasano reveals he's just in it for the money and to see the look in Laurent's face. Apparently, he already had connections with Coleman and Sam Aswell, making it a very poetic reunion. When Gin pressed for details, Laurent explained he understood what was going on once Edamura's blood bag was visible. He then put his hand on Oz to signal the same to him. Up until that moment, Edamura had them all fooled, not so much a noob anymore. The team celebrated their 200 billion haul, with Cynthia calling it their biggest score yet. Later that night, Laurent and Edamura talked privately. Edamura confirmed Laurent had fulfilled his request. They had sent an email and video of the heist to Souza's real son, who would retrieve her from the island soon. As morning broke, the group discussed their post-swindling plans, and as Edamura finally went to bed, Laurent kissed Dorothy's ring goodbye and tossed it into the sea, believing he'd finally honored her wish. Months later, Ozaki visited his wife's grave, sharing tales of their heists and revealing he'd adopted children affected by the trading scams. When Kim called, inviting him to Seoul for drinks, he declined, unwilling to get tangled in her escapades. In Seoul, Kim consoled Gin, who lamented losing custody of his daughter. She urged him to move on, bluntly reminding him he'd always been a lousy father. In London, Cynthia had adopted Kawin, a child affected by the auctions. She encouraged him to embrace a brighter future. While walking home, Kawin admired a painting by a street artist, delighting Cynthia, who shared his love for art. In Nevada, Abby reached the summit of a challenging climb, celebrating with a selfie under a stunning sunset. In Okinawa, Edamura chatted with a cafe owner about coffee, sharing his plan to taste every local blend. He smiled when Abby's selfie came through, amused by her signature middle finger. Meanwhile, Laurent had achieved his dream of becoming a diplomat. At the White House, he admired the Hideyoshi capsule toy Edamura had given him, smiling as the new US president addressed the nation, revealed to be the actor from Edamura's beloved Die Hot series. If you got this far, I bet you'd like this next video. Until next time, Nimbus out.